She arrived soaked for the job interview, but still won the billionaire's heart. The storm had rolled in without mercy, drenching the streets in sheets of relentless rain. She clutched her small handbag tight against her chest, shoes splashing through puddles as she hurried toward the towering glass building ahead. Every step felt heavier, her blouse and skirt clinging uncomfortably to her skin, soaked through from the downpour. She was 25, young, ambitious, and determined not to let the cruel timing of the storm shatter the one chance she had been waiting for. With her heart pounding, she pushed open the grand revolving doors of the skyscraper, drawing immediate stares from the pristine lobby. Perfectly dressed candidates already sat poised in their immaculate suits, their eyes narrowing with judgment as she entered, dripping and trembling from the cold. But she lifted her chin, refusing to shrink beneath their silent ridicule. Her spirit would not be defined by appearances, no matter how pitiful she looked in that moment. The receptionist hesitated before pointing her toward the waiting area, whispering something under her breath that made two of the other applicants chuckle. She ignored them, choosing a seat by the corner, her wet clothes leaving faint marks on the sleek leather chair. She closed her eyes for a second, repeating to herself why she was there. This wasn't about a paycheck alone, it was about proving she belonged in a world that seemed to constantly shut her out. When the elevator doors opened, the atmosphere shifted. Every head turned as a tall young man stepped out, his presence commanding instant silence. He was only 28, yet already known as the billionaire who had doubled his family's empire, a man whose decisions could build futures or break them in a heartbeat. His tailored suit carried no rain, no flaw, no weakness, and yet his eyes did not search for perfection among the polished faces in the room. Instead, they locked onto her. For a fleeting second, she thought it was a mistake. She straightened in her chair, feeling suddenly self-conscious under his steady gaze. But he did not look away. His brow furrowed slightly, curiosity flickering across his expression as if he saw something no one else dared to notice. Without a word, he stepped past the row of pristine candidates and whispered something to the panel of interviewers inside the glass conference room. They exchanged surprised glances but nodded quickly, rising to their feet. One by one, they filed out, leaving the billionaire himself standing by the door. Then, to everyone's shock, he gestured directly toward her. Before we dive deeper into this journey, hit the like button, subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from. We love hearing your stories too. The room fell into a tense hush. The other applicants stared, some with disbelief, others with envy, as her name was called. She hesitated for a breath, the weight of the moment pressing down like the rain still dripping from her hair. Then she rose, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor, every step carrying both fear and defiance. When she reached him, he offered no smile, no words of reassurance, only a steady hand guiding her into the room. As the door closed behind them, the muffled whispers of the others vanished, leaving only the hum of silence between them. She stood facing him, her wet clothes clinging, her pride intact. He studied her, not with mockery, but with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. The storm outside still thundered, but inside the glass walls of that office, another kind of storm was brewing, one that would soon change the course of both their lives. His lips curved into the faintest smile as he broke the silence. Let's skip the usual questions. Tell me who you really are. Her breath caught at the unexpected words. No polite introduction, no formal handshake, no resume demanded. Just that question, raw and unfiltered, cutting through the stiff air like lightning. She blinked, still dripping rainwater onto the glossy floor, her mind scrambling to catch up. She had rehearsed countless possible questions the interview panel might throw at her. Strengths, weaknesses, career goals, experience, but never this. His eyes didn't waver. There was no trace of mockery, only a strange mixture of challenge and curiosity. Gathering herself, she answered softly but firmly, explaining that she was more than the soaked clothes she wore, more than the weather that betrayed her, more than the quiet dismissal she had endured throughout her life. She told him she was someone who worked hard, who didn't quit when life made things unfair, someone who wanted a chance to show her worth beyond the surface. The young billionaire leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, absorbing her words. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, but inside the silence felt louder than the storm. He tilted his head slightly, as though measuring not just her response but the conviction behind it. Then, with an almost imperceptible smirk, he asked why she had come to his company specifically, knowing she would be competing against candidates who had more polished resumes and wealthier backgrounds. She hesitated only for a moment before answering that she admired how the company had started with grit and vision, not luxury. She spoke about wanting to be part of something that built value rather than just flaunted fortune. For the first time, his gaze softened. It was clear she wasn't trying to flatter him. Her tone carried too much sincerity. Across the glass walls, she could see the silhouettes of the other applicants waiting impatiently, some pacing, others whispering. She knew they were sneering at her soaked figure and wondering why she had been chosen. But as the billionaire asked deeper questions, about her past, about moments when she had to push through impossible odds, she answered with honesty and quiet strength. Her words painted a portrait not of perfection, but of resilience. He listened, leaning forward now, eyes intent, as if each answer revealed a layer he had been searching for but rarely found in this world of wealth and appearances. Then came his next question, low and deliberate. You don't seem like you're here just for a job. What is it that you're really chasing? The question hung in the air like a challenge she hadn't expected. She gripped the edge of the chair, searching her heart for the truth. She could say money, because she needed it. She could say stability, because she longed for it. But instead, she admitted she was chasing dignity, the right to be seen, to stand on her own 2 feet without being reduced to her background or her soaked appearance. Her voice trembled slightly, but the conviction was undeniable. Something shifted in his expression, respect, perhaps even admiration. He studied her for another long moment, then rose from his chair. The sudden movement startled her, and before she could react, he stepped closer, his tone steady but unreadable. This interview is over, he said, and her heart sank. Was that it? Had she failed despite everything? But then he added words that froze her in place. Come with me. There's something else you need to see. Her pulse raced as he opened the door, leading her away from the conference room, away from the others, into the unknown. Her legs felt unsteady as she followed him through the long corridor, the polished floors echoing with each step. Behind the glass wall, she caught one last glimpse of the other candidates, their faces twisted in confusion and bitterness as they watched her leave. Their whispers trailed like shadows, but she forced herself to keep her head high. The billionaire walked with calm certainty, not once looking back, and she could feel the weight of curiosity pressing against her chest. Where was he taking her? Why had he ended the interview so abruptly? They entered an elevator, the soft chime marking their descent to an unknown floor. She glanced at him, but his face revealed nothing. His expression caught somewhere between businesslike composure and something more personal, more searching. The silence between them wasn't empty. It pulsed with unspoken questions. When the doors slid open, she expected another pristine office or some conference hall. Instead, they stepped into a vast open space that seemed nothing like the luxurious upper floors. The hum of machines, the faint smell of ink and paper, the bustle of workers in simple uniforms. It was the production floor, the beating heart of the company. Her eyes widened, taking in the rows of employees who glanced up with surprise at the rare sight of their young CEO walking among them. No boardroom glamour, no polished marble, just real work, real people. The billionaire moved with familiarity, greeting a few workers by name, and for a moment she saw him stripped of the aloof reputation painted by magazines. He wasn't untouchable here, he was one of them. He stopped by a workstation and turned to her. This, he said, his voice low but clear, is where it all truly begins. Not in the offices above. Not in the luxury everyone sees. Here. She felt his eyes linger on her face, as if measuring her reaction. And without hesitation, she stepped forward, speaking with a few of the workers. Her kindness was effortless, her tone genuine, not forced. She listened, asked questions, even laughed with one of them who joked about the chaos of deadlines. In mere minutes, the suspicion in their eyes melted into warmth. The billionaire stood slightly apart, watching in silence. Each smile she received, each gesture of respect she gave, only deepened the quiet intensity in his gaze. When she turned back to him, she realized he had been observing every detail. Her soaked clothes clung to her still, but she carried herself with a grace that seemed untouched by discomfort. She felt out of place in the grand lobby earlier, but here, among these workers, she belonged naturally. He walked closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Do you know why I brought you here? His tone carried weight, almost daring her to answer. She swallowed, admitting she didn't know. A flicker of a smile curved his lips, but there was something more serious beneath it. He leaned in slightly, his eyes locking onto hers with unsettling intensity. Because the people who survive up there, he gestured vaguely toward the shining floors above, are not always the ones who truly understand what keeps this empire alive. I wanted to see who you really were when the masks were gone. Her heart pounded at his words, and for a moment she couldn't tell if this was still about a job, or something else entirely. His voice dropped even lower as he asked, "Now tell me, if given the choice, would you rather impress the rich upstairs, or stand with the people down here?" Her throat tightened at the weight of his question. It wasn't the kind of choice one expected during an interview, and yet it felt far more important than any resume bullet point she had ever written. The echo of his words hung in the air, vibrating against the steady hum of the machines around them. She glanced at the workers nearby, people who had paused discreetly to observe the exchange, their faces worn but kind. Then she thought of the stiff, polished candidates upstairs, waiting to be measured only by suits, connections, and appearances. Her answer came softly, almost instinctively, but with a strength that surprised even herself. She said she would stand with the people down here, because these were the hands that built the fortune, the foundation behind the empire, the ones whose worth was too often ignored. The billionaire's jaw tightened, though his eyes flickered with a spark of something she couldn't quite name: respect, admiration, maybe even relief. He stepped back slightly, as if needing space to process her response. "Most would have lied," he said finally, his tone quiet but sharp. "Most would have told me exactly what they thought I wanted to hear." She stood her ground, her soaked frame trembling but her gaze steady. "Then maybe you've been listening to the wrong people," she replied, the words spilling before she could stop them. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them, and then something remarkable happened. He laughed, not mockingly but freely, a sound that felt strange even to him, as though he hadn't let it out in years. That laugh, however brief, broke something open. He leaned against the railing, studying her as if she were a puzzle he had long been trying to solve. Then his expression shifted, growing serious once more. "Do you know what it's like," he began slowly, "to have everything money can buy and yet feel as though you own nothing real?" The vulnerability in his tone startled her. She shook her head gently, waiting for him to continue. He spoke of endless meetings filled with people chasing his fortune rather than his vision, of parties overflowing with shallow conversations, of days where he wondered if anyone around him even saw him as human. The weight of his confession settled heavily between them, and she realized that behind his wealth, behind the sharp suits and confident stride, lived a man just as lonely and uncertain as anyone else. Her heart softened. She told him she knew what it was like to be unseen too, though in her case, it wasn't because of excess but because of lack of wealth, lack of privilege, lack of being taken seriously. She admitted she was tired of being dismissed, tired of being measured by things she couldn't control. For a moment, their worlds, so far apart in money and status, overlapped perfectly in pain. That shared truth hung between them like a fragile bridge neither expected to find. His eyes never left hers as he spoke again, this time with a determination that made her pulse race. "You're different. You don't try to impress. You don't ask for anything. That's exactly why I can't stop listening to you." He exhaled, almost as if admitting it cost him something. Then, with a steadiness that made her chest tighten, he said, "I'm about to make a choice. One that could change everything." She froze, her heart thundering as his words sank in. What decision was he about to make, and why did it feel like her future was bound to it? The silence between them stretched like a taut string, ready to snap. His gaze never faltered, those piercing blue eyes scanning her face as if he were searching for something she wasn't even sure she carried. She felt exposed, raw, and yet oddly powerful, because for the first time, she realized he wasn't interviewing her anymore. He was confessing something of himself. The storm outside had quieted to a drizzle, faint drops tapping against the distant windows, but the storm inside this unfinished conversation raged louder. He drew in a breath, his jaw tightening as though the decision pressing on him was one he had avoided for years. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, though threaded with vulnerability. "I'm tired of living in a world where every hand extended toward me is reaching for money. Every smile has a price. Every promise comes with an expectation. And then you walk in, soaked to the skin, carrying nothing but honesty. Do you understand what that does to me?" Her pulse thudded in her ears. She wanted to answer, but no words seemed fitting. How could she, a woman who had spent her entire life being dismissed for not having enough, possibly understand the weight of having too much? And yet, looking at him now, she realized their struggles were opposite ends of the same coin. She had lived in a world that gave her nothing, while he had lived in a world that gave him everything except sincerity. They were both starved, she for opportunity, he for authenticity. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet strangely comforting. "I can give you the position you came here for," he said, his voice low. "But that feels too small for what you've just shown me. You have something I can't put on a resume, something no money can buy. I need you beside me, not as an employee, but as a partner in something greater." Her breath hitched. A partner? The word carried a weight that stretched far beyond business. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice, but it trembled when she asked what exactly he meant. He paced slowly, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, loosening the composure he had worn like armor. "I've been planning a project, something separate from this empire. A foundation that would give chances to people who, like you, are overlooked because they don't fit the picture of what success is supposed to look like. I've searched for someone to lead it with me, someone who doesn't see life through polished glass. Do you see now why your answers matter more than anything written on paper?" His confession landed heavy, filling her chest with both awe and disbelief. She had come drenched, humiliated, certain her chance had been washed away by the storm, and now she stood in front of a billionaire offering her not just a job, but a mission. Her eyes stung with unshed tears, but she held them back, unwilling to let vulnerability be mistaken for weakness. She asked him why he would take such a leap on someone who had walked into his empire dripping water onto his pristine floors. His lips curved into a faint smile, softer than any she had seen before. "Because when you walked in, you had nothing but dignity left, and that's more valuable to me than all the fortunes combined. You remind me of what matters." His words pierced her, unraveling defenses she hadn't even known she carried. She opened her mouth to respond, but he lifted a hand, silencing her gently. "There's something else," he said, his tone shifting deeper, more personal. "Since the moment you stepped into that lobby, something in me hasn't let go of you. It isn't just about the project. It isn't just about business. I haven't felt this alive in years, and I can't deny it anymore." Her heart slammed against her ribs. His words came slowly, as if each one carried the risk of rejection, but his eyes remained locked on hers with unwavering intent. "I think I've fallen for you." Her breath left her in a rush, her world spinning. This wasn't the script she had written in her head, not the story she had expected to live when she pressed her wet shoes into that building. She wanted to protest, to remind him they were strangers, worlds apart. But deep down, in the quietest corner of her heart, she felt the truth echo back. Something had sparked between them, something undeniable. The billionaire stood inches away, waiting, vulnerable despite his fortune. His voice trembled for the first time as he asked, "Will you take this chance, with me, not just in business, but in life?" Her chest rose and fell with quick, shallow breaths, the weight of his question pressing down on her like the storm that had soaked her hours before. She stared at him, this man whose name was etched across financial headlines, whose fortune was envied by millions, yet who now stood before her stripped of all that armor, offering something she had never imagined. Her lips parted, but the words tangled in her throat. Every rational thought screamed caution. He was a billionaire. She was a young woman with nothing but dreams and a drenched resume. Their worlds weren't just different, they were galaxies apart. And yet, staring into his eyes, she saw not the power, not the money, but the loneliness he had confessed, the yearning for something real. That recognition stirred something deep within her, something she had tried so hard to bury beneath years of rejection. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not empty. She finally whispered that she didn't know how to answer, because her entire life she had been told opportunities like this weren't for people like her. She admitted she was terrified of being a distraction, a story whispered in boardrooms, a woman accused of chasing money she didn't even care for. The words trembled out of her, raw and unpolished, but they were the truth. His face softened, his expression etched with both pain and hope. "That's exactly why I asked you," he murmured. "Because you're not blinded by fortune. You're not chasing a title. You're chasing something purer. That's what makes you the only person I can trust with this." Her heart clenched, fighting between fear and possibility. For years, she had begged for someone to see her as more than what she lacked, more than the clothes she wore, more than the balance in her bank account, more than her background. And here he was, offering not just recognition, but partnership, love, and purpose. Still, doubt gnawed at her. She asked him what would happen when the world found out, when headlines screamed that the billionaire had fallen for a girl who had walked into his empire soaking wet. Would he still look at her the same way then? His eyes didn't flinch. "Let them talk," he said firmly. "Money has never silenced the world, but maybe love can silence the noise inside of me." The simplicity of his conviction nearly broke her. She bit her lip, eyes glistening, afraid to trust the very thing she had longed for most. Yet even as she hesitated, something inside her whispered that this was the moment her life had been leading to, not the job, not the paycheck, but the chance to be seen for who she truly was. She exhaled slowly, her trembling easing into steadiness. "If I do this," she said softly, "it won't be because of your wealth. It will be because of what I see when you stop pretending to be untouchable." His breath hitched, and for the first time, the mask he wore cracked completely. He reached for her hand, tentative, almost as though afraid she might pull away. But she didn't. Their fingers intertwined, and for a moment, the storm outside, the doubts, the stares of the world, they all faded. It was just them, two souls stripped bare of wealth and poverty, meeting in the fragile middle ground of truth. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Then walk beside me, not behind, not beneath. Beside me." Her heart pounded, her throat thick with emotion, but she nodded, a small trembling nod that carried the weight of a lifetime of longing. The decision was made, but the moment was only beginning. She knew stepping into this new path would come with storms fiercer than the one that had drenched her clothes. But now, she wasn't facing them alone. For the first time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, love could rewrite the story life had forced upon her. As their hands remained clasped, he whispered, "Then tomorrow, the world will know you not as a candidate, but as the woman who changed everything." The next morning, sunlight poured through the glass windows of the skyscraper, scattering golden reflections across the polished marble floors. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean, as if nature itself had prepared the stage for a new beginning. She stood once again at the grand entrance, but this time she was not dripping with rain, not trembling from cold. She wore the same clothes, now dried, pressed, and humble, but she carried herself differently. Her shoulders were squared, her chin lifted, her spirit blazing with a quiet confidence that had been born the night before. When the revolving doors spun open, every eye in the lobby turned to her. The other candidates were still there, whispering in confusion, their tailored suits crisp and perfect, but their expressions unsettled. They had waited for news, for explanations, for the billionaire CEO to return and call them into the glass conference room. Instead, he walked beside her. Julian Hartwell, his name synonymous with power and fortune, was not striding ahead, not commanding the room with arrogance. He was at her side, his hand brushing against hers as though the entire skyscraper was nothing more than background noise. The whispers sharpened into gasps. Phones lifted discreetly, snapping photos. A billionaire at the height of his empire was walking shoulder to shoulder with a young woman who had arrived soaked, unnoticed, almost ridiculed just a day before. He stopped in the center of the lobby, his voice calm yet powerful as it carried across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I won't be continuing today's interviews. The position I was searching to fill has already been claimed." Murmurs exploded instantly, disbelief spreading like wildfire. One of the candidates scoffed audibly, unable to hide his outrage. But Julian didn't falter. His eyes, usually sharp and guarded, softened as he turned toward her. This woman came here without armor, without masks. She came as herself, and that is worth more than any resume stacked in my office. She is the partner I've been waiting for. Her breath caught, heat rising to her cheeks as the entire lobby seemed to spin around her. She wanted to shrink, to disappear under the weight of so many stares, but his gaze steadied her. His hand reached for hers again, unapologetic, unafraid. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. In the days that followed, headlines screamed across the nation. The billionaire who chose the girl in the rain. Some stories were cruel, painting her as opportunistic, a nobody who had stumbled into fortune. But others saw the truth. A man with everything had chosen a woman with nothing but dignity, and together they were building something far greater than wealth. They launched the foundation he had dreamed of, one designed to lift people who had been ignored, dismissed, or underestimated, the ones who had stories like hers. The first time she stepped onto the stage to speak, her voice trembled, but her words rang with authenticity. She told the crowd about the storm, about the soaked clothes and the mocking whispers. And then she told them how one man had looked past the surface and seen the strength within. The audience rose to their feet, not for Julian, not for the billionaire's name, but for her, for the reminder that true worth is not measured by appearance, privilege, or perfection. Julian stood in the wings, his eyes glistening with pride. He had built empires, amassed fortunes, and yet nothing had ever felt as valuable as watching her stand there, radiant with the truth of who she was. That night, as they walked home beneath a sky now clear of storms, she squeezed his hand and whispered, "I was chasing dignity when I came here. I never imagined I'd find love too." He smiled, leaning closer so only she could hear. "And I was chasing success. I never imagined I'd find my heart." The city lights shimmered around them, but neither needed the glow of glass towers or marble floors to feel complete. They had found what both had been searching for in different ways. Not wealth, not titles, not power, but something infinitely rarer, two souls who finally saw each other. And in that truth, happiness bloomed, not the fragile kind built on appearances, but the kind that storms cannot wash away. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, share this video and tell us in the comments, what part of this journey moved you the most? There's another story waiting for you, and it might just change the way you see the world. Thank you so much for watching and see you soon.